Good evening and welcome to the Darwin Innovation Hub. I'm Dante St. James, and tonight we're talking a little bit about emotional intelligence, specifically for business owners, as it's something that's been coming up a lot for me, with a lot of people asking how they can help to instill a bit more emotional intelligence in their staff. But some people saying that they find that there is a barrier to their own emotional intelligence. So we're going to look at a very brief way of understanding emotional intelligence, what it is, some of the advantages of having it, and to see if it's something that you could perhaps develop in your own life. So first of all, let's get underway. So there's some interesting studies when it comes to emotional intelligence. And whilst it's hardly a surprise that emotional intelligence is seen as highly important to many sectors, there's some very specific stuff in there that tells us that, well, it's not just a good thing, but it could be a very vital tool for business. Talent Smart EQ, which is an agency that works with emotional quotient or emotional intelligence, says that emotional intelligence accounts for nearly 60% of job performance and 90% of top performers at work having emotional intelligence. Michael Miller, who's a writer for another EQ-based publication, says that a company that prioritizes emotional intelligence is 22 times more likely to perform higher than companies that do not. I look at that as a founder and as an owner of businesses, and I think this is something I feel like we really should get onto. Is emotional intelligence something that we look at? Is it something we prioritize? Or is this something that we think is perhaps, a little bit out of the realm of what we would normally look at? So I think given that data, it's probably worth looking at. Cornerstone University in the US says that only about 36% of people, though, given it's so important, but only about 36% of those people are what we would call emotionally intelligent, which is quite disturbing given that it accounts for high performance. It accounts for the people who are performing high at work, and that it can have, and in that earlier quote, 22 times the increase in the likelihood of a company performing than companies that don't have it. And it goes further. Michael Miller then goes on to say the cost of low emotional intelligence. So the lack of it in that company includes higher stress, lower productivity, and damaged trust, in amongst other things. This is where things get a little scary, because you think it's not just a lack of you being able to perform, it actually takes you in reverse. A lack of emotional intelligence can actually bring a project completely undone or a company undone. Gallup polls in the US have stated that emotional intelligence interventions in the workplace can reduce employee turnover by 63%. Now, in a world where we still have this situation where we are having a workplace crisis, not enough of a workforce to be able to fill the roles that we have, we would think that perhaps that little bit of emotional intelligence reducing turnover by 63%, that could be a powerful one. And we already know through businesses that not everyone leaves because of money. Not everyone leaves because they can get more money elsewhere. Not everyone leaves because they feel like that money can be in so many other, it's the general driver. In fact, many, many times, convenience, the emotional stability of a workplace, the satisfaction of the work, the mission that's the company or that the individual has can be just as powerful a driver as something like money. And then further, Founder Forward has surveyed their members and readers and found that back in 2020, so back in the midst of the pandemic, more than 95% of entrepreneurs stated that emotional quotient, as opposed to IQ, is more important in leadership than IQ. So if a high IQ isn't quite what we're looking for when it comes to running high performance businesses, what is this EQ? What is emotional quotient? What is emotional intelligence? And where do we start with it? Where do we go with it? All emotional intelligence starts with self-awareness. And this is where I think, a lot of people who don't think that this is a real thing, that a performance is just get down and do it. This is where they come a little bit undone, because the beginning of emotional intelligence, and given that we've already seen that there's performance in there, there is high performance in there. There is also the risk of underperforming if emotional intelligence is not present. Given all that, then we have to understand that there's a starting point. That starting point is identifying your own emotions. It's self-awareness, understanding how your own emotions work, recognizing how all of that's in the back of your mind, you're taking it into work every day. You're taking it into your business every day. You're taking it into your family every day. But it's not all about navel gazing and taking time out to have a spa or have a day at the pub with the boys. Emotional intelligence is also about understanding where you're strong. What are your strengths? What are the natural talents and the areas where you excel? Because self-awareness is not just simply about understanding your weaknesses or understanding how you're impacted by things like emotions. It's also about knowing where you're strong. What are you good at? A quick case study I'll give you is that a few weeks ago, I was doing a workshop on this very topic with a bunch of male international students, tended to be from backgrounds where things weren't so, let's just say they weren't so wonderfully, those boys didn't want to talk, right? They really didn't want to talk that much. Certainly not about their feelings, certainly not about the way they feel or experiences. They were there to learn, and they're technology based, right? So I needed to be able to get these international students to open up about feelings, but I knew I wouldn't do that by telling them, well, we're going to be talking about feelings. That would immediately have a shutdown, and they would probably, if they don't walk out of the room, they certainly would not willingly participate. So I had to reframe that into something that I know was very strong a motivator for those boys, which was gaining career skills. They're doing an internship specifically to gain career skills. So, how can I get male international students from a background where you don't talk about your feelings, you don't admit you have feelings, and feelings are not important, to talk about that? So, it took a little bit of emotional intelligence of my own to understand how these guys think. And that was of the reframing. Reframing is a word that comes up a lot at the moment. But in this case, it was all about reframing emotional intelligence as something that gives them an edge in their career. You may not want to talk about your feelings, but there is a process we can take you through which gives you a very real career skill. And so that career skill is the ability to be able to better handle clients, better handle the workplace, better understand colleagues, to get maximum performance out of yourself and of those around you, which makes for great leadership potential. So we already saw that the leaders are more likely to succeed if they have emotional intelligence. So the whole process of that was to simply, in our case, not talk about feelings. We talked about things they did. And we started with the morning. When you got up this morning, what did you do? So we started very much with the what did you do? Give me a rundown of what it is you did. Give me a rundown of how you did whatever you did. And then moving on to, okay, so what were you thinking? Now, I'm not asking what they were feeling, because feeling is not a word that's going to get a great response from them. So, what were you doing? And what were you thinking while you did that? And that, what were you thinking, was the gateway into what they were feeling. Because inadvertently, these guys were telling me how they felt while they thought they were telling me what they were thinking. It turns out thinking and feeling were very closely aligned there. So I'd heard the frustration, the disappointment in themselves for running late for the bus that morning, the questions they were asking themselves of why they should be doing this when they're not paid. And we went through a range of these different things. And at the end, when they'd finished sharing what they were thinking as they went through their morning routines, I congratulated them and said, congratulations. You now have awareness of your own emotions. And the look of surprise on their faces was quite priceless, because they thought they were talking about what they did this morning. But what they really were doing was talking about how they felt. And I said, that is what everybody is coming into work who's going to deal with you today has gone through that same process. They woke up, they either felt great or they felt bad. Something went right, something went wrong. The kids were playing up, the kids were behaving. The bus was late, you were late, the shoes don't fit as well, the belt, you forgot the belt, so your pants felt like they were falling down all day. All these different things are what we are bringing in big sacks over our shoulders into the workplace every day. So we as leaders in these workplaces, we do that too. Everyone does that. But you can't regulate those responses to you carrying in all that baggage with you until you understand that you already are. And that's how I used emotional intelligence about this particular cohort of international students, understanding how they thought and how they would react to elicit that response from them. And that kind of emotional intelligence can be grown. You do not have to magically have it. You don't have to be born with it. It is a skill like any other skill. And it begins with some level of empathy. And empathy isn't a magical thing. It's not a cloudy thing. It's just a set of actions. Empathy is expressed through active listening. So active listening is most often people think of it as you sitting there nodding your head as someone's telling you a story. Oh, yes. Oh, that's right. And responding in a way that lets the other person who's telling the story know that you really are listening and taking it all in. Now, you and I both know that we could do that with our in-laws, with our parents, with our kids, and they could be going blah, 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 blah. You go, yes, dear, yes, dear, yes, dear. And that is not active listening. Active listening then has a demonstrated part, which is the body language you're using to let people know that you're listening, but it also has the inside your head part, which is, are you actually actively listening? Now, when I find that I'm not actively listening, but I'm acting as though I am, I'll remind myself in my own head, this is about them, not about you. This is about them, not about you. So when I find myself drifting off, I come back again. And quite often it'll be accompanied by some kind of body language, which will have me just straighten my chair or perhaps uncross my legs or shift in my seat a little bit. Because as I'm becoming more aware of them, I also realize that I become aware of myself. So we pay attention to verbal and non-verbal cues to understand from others what those perspectives could be. When we actively listen, we don't just hear, we watch. We can see the movement in people. We can see the slight twitches in the eyes. It's how that they might be hiding something else. There may be more to the story than what they're sharing verbally. Empathy also then comes from not from walking in someone else's shoes, because I think that's a really cheap way of describing it. I think it's more about perspective taking. It's about seeing things from another's point of view, not by walking in their shoes, but actually looking at it the way they look at it. And half the time, you cannot possibly know how they are seeing something until you ask them, or at least listen long enough to hear how they see it. This is how you learn how other cultures operate. This is how you learn how to do something that you've never done before. This is how you learn to understand that not everybody thinks the same way you do. And then the output of all this, of the active listening and the perspective taking, is then a form of respectful communication. Communication that uses a kind of language that's considerate and avoids taking a judgy position. We're not here to judge what people are saying. And this is a message probably to the men in the room more than anyone else, but we're not always sitting there looking for you to fix our problem for us. Sometimes we just want to be heard. So we use language that isn't shutting someone down by saying, oh, that's ridiculous. When you might be thinking that, sure. But then saying to someone that's ridiculous completely invalidates their whole experience. That is not empathetic. That is not emotional intelligence. That's just you preferring to be right than preferring to help someone. So then we take these powers of emotional intelligence into our workplace, because workplaces are inherently stressful. Not everyone's there for the same reason. Not everyone's there for the same motivations. Not everyone's there with the same baggage of emotions they brought into work that day. Some brought some stressful emotions. Some of them brought happy emotions. Some of them brought very neutral emotions with them. So part of that whole we're aware of someone else's feelings and we are also aware of our own means that we will understand then, and I'm more about you identifying your own stressors than everyone else's, that you identify what it is that stresses you out. What are the triggers that lead you to stress in a workplace or in a business as an owner of a business or as an employee of a business? What are the things that trigger you? There's a very good chance that if it triggers you, it may trigger someone else as well. And once you become self aware of the fact that you can be triggered, then you realize, oh, so can others. They can be triggered too. I know that they trigger something in me. I wonder if I can sometimes trigger something in them. And that's when you start getting into real emotional intelligence, is where you're willing to say to yourself that I'm not just the receiver of triggers from others, but I'm also the cause of triggers in others. I'm not just the receiver of stress, I'm also a giver of stress. And I may not have realized this before, but lo and behold, the emotional moment or the road to Damascus experience is you have this revelation that you're not perfect. Wow. For some of us, that takes all of our lives to realize that. So, how do we then cope with that? There are coping mechanisms you can use. Box breathing is my favorite one. When in a very stressful situation, I'll often walk away. I've got a tree outside of this office that I'll step out to, and I'll just simply just look up into that tree, pretend that I'm looking at something in the tree, but really what I'm doing is just zoning out for a moment so that I can stop thinking about that thing and I can just focus on listening and a bit of mindfulness. So things like deep breathing and mindfulness and exercise are very good at this. I know that when I go to the gym at 5 a.m. in the morning, which is ridiculous, but I do it anyway, it completely empties my head out because I get very, very much. My partner sees me go into a autopilot mode of sorts, where I suddenly become very unaware of my surroundings, but I'm very focused and in a deep concentration on what I am doing. Really, I'm listening to a podcast at the time, taking a lot of deep learning in place, and then carrying out a repetitive structure to my morning. But of course, if things are getting to really stress you out and you're very highly triggered by very many things, you may be carrying a lot of anxiety. Well, it's natural to assume that you may need help. Now, that's emotional awareness of yourself. Perhaps you can see that in others, that sometimes others need support. Sometimes others need to talk to a colleague or a mentor or a manager or HR or someone, quite often a therapist, a counselor. If there is an employee assistance program, those things are very easy to access. Even these days, there's the ability to be able to go and see a GP and go into a mental health plan, which allows you to access through Medicare some free help when it comes to your mental health. And that, I guess, is where some kind of emotional intelligence helps you to identify the things that are possibly not just stressing you out, but causing you real mental harm. And when you're aware of that for yourself, the flip side is being aware of it for others as well. And in business, we tend to be possibly the most self absorbed, self oriented people on the planet. There is nothing more selfish than business, even if it's set up in a way that's a social enterprise or something that's going to help people, help the planet, help something. It still comes from a need for you to satisfy that need to help in you. Business is very self interested, and that's not a bad thing. In fact, it is what makes it probably the only thing that can save the world. So if we find that, yes, there is a self interest in business, we can be interested enough in ourselves to understand that we have emotions and that the people we work with have emotions. And then understanding our own emotions helps us to understand their emotions and gives us that 22x approach to being better and more equipped to succeed than those who don't have good, solid emotional intelligence. Then it's good for business, good for the planet, good for the world, good for the people around us. The good news is it's not just one sector that gets this. It's not just you working for government and working in a corporate administrative role. Effective communication is effective in any sector. You choose any kind of job. You can go from the dentist's office to the mechanic's workshop. You can go from a government office, which is doing AO6 and AO5 positions, and then go into the most hard-headed startup working in a tech firm. And it all still remains the same. Clear, concise communication, straightforward language that is easy to understand. Now, some places and some people like to weaponize that and call it radical candor, where they'll weaponize honesty as a weapon and they'll use it as a way to stab, stab, stab at people to get those, the emotions they're carrying with them to be able to unleash that on others and just say, just being honest, just being honest, just being radically candid. This is where things get that little bit hard, where you're being, yes, clear and concise and sometimes very direct. But when it's used as a weapon, that's not emotionally intelligent. That's emotionally manipulative. A very different thing. Yes, the active listening, where we pay attention to what others are saying, but not just the hearing of that, but seeing them do that. We have a lot of trouble with picking up social cues through things like Microsoft Teams and Zoom. So I like to see as many cameras on when I'm doing these things as possible, simply because you can react to the emotional cues you're getting from other people. The good thing about active listening is it's not just listening, it can actually be talking as well. The talking is just in the form of asking clarifying questions. Did you not understand what they were saying? Did you zone out there for a second because, you've got to get home and cook dinner for the kids and you've got to, sort out this problem with the husband and you've got to, do some laundry and you've got to get ready for tomorrow and pack the gym bag for the morning, and you just tuned out for a second because life is overwhelming, right? So you stop and ask and say, look, sorry, I just zoned out there for a second, not because I don't care, because I've just got a lot going on right now, but I really want to hear what you said. Can you just repeat that bit? Or you can not be as wordy as that and say instead, I didn't pick up that last bit. Can you repeat that for me? That's active listening as well, even though it's speaking. The non-verbal cues, be aware of your own body language when talking to people. You're sitting there with the arms crossed and with a big nasty look on your face. That's not allowing someone room to come and approach you. It makes you very unapproachable. The good, emotionally intelligent leader will not necessarily have their door open all the time, because that's ridiculous. You need to get work done too. But you at least would make yourself in a position where people can feel safe to approach you. And if you don't know whether you have emotional intelligence, if you don't know whether people can understand you or whether you are able to work well with others, there are going to be some people in your workplace who can tell you that. It usually comes from other team leaders and other managers. I work with an incredible woman who is constantly seeking feedback. And you think, wow, surely you wouldn't need that much feedback. You'd just be able to pick up on it yourself. But she does not. She doesn't pick up on social cues as effectively as, say, I do. So she wants to know, did I do that right? Did I say that right? Do you feel like I was listening to you? And it stopped being annoying very quickly when you realize that she's becoming better and better at this, because she's learning how to become emotionally intelligent. She may not be automatically and naturally emotionally intelligent, but she has recognized that she can learn this skill. And that's really very encouraging. So emotional intelligence then will help you to build trusting relationships with stakeholders, because it allows you to be honest and transparent in your dealings. When you're emotionally intelligent, you want to be honest and transparent, because you realize that honesty isn't giving away everything for free. It's not showing all your cards and giving someone a great advantage over you. It's just simply being honest and transparent. It's nothing deeper than that. It's just something which you can do that makes things easier for your customers or for your colleagues or for your clients. It also helps you to communicate not just effectively, but regularly with stakeholders. I recently had a very distrusting relationship with a client. They didn't really trust me, and I certainly didn't trust them. that person had burned me before some years ago. So it never really worked. We never really met at the same place. We're just always trying to avoid each other and trying to work around each other to get this thing done. And so the communication dropped. Now, my emotional intelligence should have been enough for me to say, I'm struggling with this. I need help. But no, I got really pig-headed, and he got pig-headed, and it's blown up into a problem now. So now we're finally coming to the table and having the communication, but of course it's too late. It doesn't save that project. So that honesty and transparency then leads to more effective communication, because someone will be honest with you if you are honest with them. Not using it as a weapon. You're not attacking someone, but you're saying, dude, I really struggle to communicate with you. It's because of this thing that happened years ago. And I know that's on me. I know that's on me because it's my reaction to it, but I'm struggling with it. So please be patient with me as I do work on overcoming this. I really want this to work for you. Now, I didn't do that. And of course, now it's too late. We're finally talking. And that is, like I just said, it was taking ownership of your action and your commitments. I dropped the ball. Yes, he did something awful to me years ago. But I am the one who has to deal with that. I am the one in the position of being the company and he is the client. So it's up to me, not up to him to apologize. He owes me nothing. I have to take ownership of that, of my actions and my commitments. Otherwise, I had the choice to never take him on as a client in the first place. I didn't have to, but I decided to, but then didn't follow up with the right emotional intelligence to recognize that I wasn't really coping with that. So adaptability then becomes a real tool in emotional intelligence. It helps you to navigate change as it happens and a lot of uncertainty. And we are certainly going into some very uncharted waters in the world right now. Change in the IT industry and any industry at all is inevitable. There are changes coming to all job types through AI and automation. There are changes coming to job roles, which will mean that certain job roles will cease to exist. But that's not really that different to what happened 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. When I was in high school, I wouldn't have dreamed I'd be doing the work I'm doing now. Imagine in the 1980s, right? I mean, I hit high school in 1989? 1987, sorry, was my first year of high school. And so I look at that time and go, I never dreamed I'd be talking on a video call to people all over the world through something called LinkedIn or YouTube or Zoom. Yet here we are. So change is inevitable and you can roll with it. Like they say, you can either ride the wave or get swept up in it. So change is there. Now, it doesn't mean you have to accept all change for the sake of change. Sometimes change is silly and stupid. And I've seen that in a couple of logo changes with a couple of brands lately, particularly some clothing brands, which are just changed for the sake of changing. So sometimes it's worth standing up for keeping things the way they are. Emotional intelligence is what guides you to know that, is that a battle that you need to fight or is it not? Is that comment on that Facebook post really required from you or is it not? Then that change comes in the form of continuous learning. And I don't think it's just about latest technologies and trends. Change and learning comes from understanding how people's needs change as well. In the workplace, at home, kids are not the same today as they were 20 years ago. There is change. Learning how to work with that change, learning how to work with a Generation Z. And I cringe to say Z because I'm not American, but let's just say I'm embracing the change. Learning to work with Generation Z is hard when you come from a different generation, from a different group of people with different work ethics and different priorities in life. So part of that may be to learn what the concerns of Gen Z are. Learn why they will just not put up with a harsh workplace. Learn why they have trouble adapting to the workplace after graduating from uni. Learn why. Talk to them. We like to talk at them very much. My generation definitely loves to talk at Gen Z. But what if we could just show a little emotional intelligence and realize these are humans too? They're just younger versions of us, with a very different upbringing and a very different background. Let's hear what they have to say. You may learn something, which leads you to develop really creative solutions to the big challenges that are coming up in the world. And as startup founders, as some of you are, That's essentially what you're doing. You're coming up with very new solutions to very new challenges that our grandparents and parents never would have dreamed were going to happen. Imagine a world where everybody is connected to an electronic pulse that goes through telephone wires, and now no one even really uses the telephone part of those wires. We couldn't have predicted that when I was a kid. Internet really wasn't around till the mid 90s for most Australians. So applying the emotional quotient or emotional intelligence is about advancing your business. By developing emotional intelligence, you do enhance your performance. Like we said before, 90% of high performers in business tend to be people who have strong emotional intelligence. It helps you build stronger relationships because you understand who you are, therefore you can understand who someone else is. You can't understand someone else's point of view until you understand your own. So, whilst emotional intelligence seems like a fluffy thing that's very woke, it's actually really a way for you to better understand yourself. When you understand yourself, you can understand the world around you. And it can advance a career in IT and a career in administration, a career in community services, a career in construction, a career in mechanics, a career in quantum physics, whatever it is you choose, it all can be there. Now, this is where our point of difference comes when we're talking about, I guess, AI and automation. We might think that AI and automation is something which is going to take all our jobs. It's going to make life incredibly difficult, incredibly hard for us. But the reality really is that AI can't do certain things. It cannot do that emotional quotient, emotional intelligence stuff. It can certainly approximate and pretend, but it's not looking straight down the camera at you, doing a little scratch here because the beard's itchy, and smiling at you because you said something which was amusing. It might be able to approximate that through a robot, but we're not there yet. So the differentiator between us and the robots is still the fact that robots really only make you laugh when they fall over. I don't know if that's deeply philosophical or just me trying to wrap up a webinar, but that's what emotional intelligence is all about. It's not fluffy, it's not woke. It's just the ability for you to understand yourself and then understand others as well. When you do that, things flow, things work. People do the things you want them to do, and your business grows. Hope you can apply some today. And well, a bit late today if you're in Australia, maybe tomorrow. And hopefully that's been helpful. So thank you so much for being part of this. And I really hope to see you on the next stream. I'll be doing another one next week around the same time.